I'm Chef Danny, and today we are making pork loin. I'm going to teach you the techniques of cooking a perfect pork loin and all the sides to go with it. So grab your pencil and get ready for Chef Danny's culinary class. Today we are making pork loin, and this is a beautiful pork loin that we got from the butcher. You can see that it's already tied up and ready to go. So what I'm doing now is seasoning it. You want to make sure to season liberally when you're cooking such a big piece of meat, because all that flavor needs to get into the meat, and it's such a lot, you need to have a lot of seasoning. So we've got our special seasoning blend, and we're going to sprinkle that on the top. We're going to do it all the way around on all sides. Cover it pretty liberally with our seasoning. Now this is my special seasoning blend. You can use whatever seasonings you'd like, or you can find my special seasoning and rub it all over the outside of your pork loin. Once we get that done, we're going to do our salt. This is our seasoned garlic salt. It has garlic and the rosemary in it. And that you also want to be liberal with. Every time I'm putting salt on there, everybody thinks it's way too much. That's a lot of salt, but it's a lot of meat. This is not for one person. I'm not putting 2 tablespoons on one serving. It's a lot of meat for a lot of people. So you want to make sure and season liberally so when it comes out, it has some delicious flavor to it. So once we get that all the way around, then we're going to add some garlic. I like to have garlic with my pork. I like the flavor, and I like it to infuse that flavor into the pork. So the way that we do that is we poke holes in it and make little pockets to put our garlic in. So that's what I'm going to do next. You're going to take your knife and you're going to poke holes just all over the pork. And that's where we're going to tuck little cloves of garlic. Now when that cooks in the oven, the garlic's going to infuse into the meat, and the garlic will soften and be delicious to snack on, but it's going to give it that nice garlicky flavor. Make sure when you're doing this that you don't cut through the strings that the butcher has put on there, because we need those strings to hold it together as it's cooking. So now we're going to pop some garlic and stick that in the little holes. Now we're not going to chop the garlic this time because we need the whole pieces, and as the meat roasts, the garlic will roast, and you'll have some delicious garlic also. So we're going to take some whole cloves. Let's do 4 of them. All right, so to pop your garlic, you want to hold it on its side. You want to take your knife. Let's clean that off. And you want to put it on the top and hit it like you mean it. Pop it really hard. Let's do all 4. And then the peel comes right off, and it's easy for you to take the skin. Now, these have kind of fallen apart. What we're doing is we're getting all those oils going, we're releasing all that, but the fact that they're falling apart is a good thing, because when we go to stick it into our pork, we can take little pieces of it. All right, clear this off. Now the holes that we made in the pork, we're going to take the garlic, and you see how this one is kind of broken in 2 pieces, so I'm going to go ahead and take 1 piece in here and 1 piece in here. All this garlic is going to give this a delicious flavor. When it cooks inside the meat like that, it's more of a roasted garlic flavor, and it's delicious. And when you cut through the slices of the pork, you'll see the little pieces of the garlic all in the pork. All right, once we get that all in there, then this is ready to go in the oven. But I'm going to go ahead and season it one more time. I know we've seasoned a lot. I'm going to go ahead and season on the top, and we're going to put it in a roasting pan. So let me show you what that looks like. We have a nice roasting pan here, and the roasting pan has a rack on the bottom. That rack is going to let the meat sit up, but the juices are going to drip underneath the rack, and that's what we're going to use to make a sauce. But you want to keep the meat up out of it because you don't want the meat to boil. When the meat gets in the oven and it's cooking at a high temperature, it will boil, and you don't want that. So we want to sit it up a little bit off the bottom of the pan. So we're going to put our meat on top of here. And we're going to put it in just like that. We're not going to cover it. We don't want it to steam. We want it to cook in the oven and get a nice brown crust on the outside. So this is going to go in 350. It takes about 45 minutes, and then our pork will be perfectly cooked. While that's cooking, we're going to get some parsnips ready for our parsnip puree. While our roast is cooking in the oven, we're going to go ahead and get our parsnips ready. Now, parsnips are in the same family as carrots. It's a root. It grows under the ground. It grows this big, tall frond on the top of it that's beautiful also. But they're a little bit thinner on the end than carrots are. But we're going to cut these up and make something called a parsnip puree. And parsnip puree looks a lot like mashed potatoes, but it has a sweeter taste because the parsnips have a really sweet flavor similar to their cousin, the carrots. But what we want to do is peel all of this first. So I've got a nice peeler here, and we're going to get all of these peeled. And you'll see underneath there how white and beautiful it is. That, when you mash it up, looks just like mashed potatoes. So we're going to get all these peeled, and then we're going to cut them into chunks and cook them off in the pan to make our puree. We have all of our parsnips peeled now, and we need to cut them into chunks to get them cooked off. Well, you can see that parsnips grow kind of thin on the end, so we're going to cut the very ends of them off. You can save that in a Ziploc bag in the freezer to make your stock. But we want to cut it off of here because what will happen when we're cooking all the parsnips is that'll cook really fast, and we don't want them to cook at different temperatures. So we want to make sure that everything cooks the same. We're going to cut the ends off, and then we're going to cut them into chunks. And we want the chunks to kind of be about the same size. So we're going to cut them just like this. Now up here on the top part where it gets kind of thick, we're going to have to cut those in half. When you're making a parsnip puree, you want it to cook down pretty quickly because you want to get in there and mash it. So you don't want hard lumps in the puree. And up at the top where it's really thick, we're going to cut it in half to make it the same size as the rest of ours. As soon as we get these cut up, we're going to get them in a pan with some chicken broth and cook them down for a few minutes. The one thing about parsnips is the fact that they do have the sugars in there. When you start to mash them up, they get really silky and beautiful. But you can't have those hard chunks like I was saying. So make sure you get your pieces all pretty much the same. All of our parsnips are cut up now, and we're going to cut our broccoli next. Now what we're going to do with the broccoli is we're going to just saute that off lightly with my veggie seasoning. We're going to serve that on the side of our pork. So we have a lot of vegetables going on in this dish, but our parsnips, remember, are going to look like mashed potatoes. So we need some green color also, not to mention the fact that broccoli is delicious. So what we want to do with the broccoli is just cut the tops off, and once again we're going to save the bottom that you're going to use for a veggie stock. We're going to put those in another bowl and saute those off in the seasoning. We're going to do a little garlic and season them up. It's a delicious way to do your broccoli, and it's really easy. You sprinkle a little of the seasoning on it and a little of my veggie seasoning. Cook them down for about 2 or 3 minutes. Leave them a little bit crunchy and serve them on the side of your dish. One more. It's always a good thing when you can get lots of veggies into your meal, especially if you have children in the house, but veggies are good for everybody. And the more veggies you have, the better it is, but sometimes you have to kind of fool the children. So our parsnip puree is going to look like mashed potatoes, but it's going to be full of vitamins from the parsnips. Now we're ready to take both of these to the range and start cooking them off to get our puree ready and our sauteed broccoli. We're going to cook off our parsnips and our broccoli on the range in 2 separate pans because it's 2 separate sides for our meal and we don't want to mix them together. You could mix them together if you wanted to just mix the broccoli in with our mashed parsnips, but we're going to keep them separate for now. So we're going to go ahead and get a pan on and get our broccoli started. We're going to have it on a medium heat, and we're going to start the broccoli in a little bit of olive oil. So olive oil in the bottom of the pan, about 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and about 1 clove of chopped garlic. Let that get started cooking, and then we're going to add our broccoli. Now the broccoli is going to saute for just a few minutes, and then we're going to add our veggie seasoning. And the veggie seasoning is a mix of red wine, soy sauce, and a little bit of balsamic vinegar. That's a great mixture that you can mix up in a bottle ahead of time and have it right by the range for anything that you're cooking, especially veggies. We're going to go ahead and go in with our broccoli. This is fresh broccoli. You could also do this with frozen. Once the broccoli heats up and it starts moving around the pan, we're going to let it get a little bit of color on it before we add our seasoning to it. So while that's happening, in our other pan, I'm going to get the parsnips going. They take a little bit longer than the broccoli does, so we want to get those on a bigger burner with higher heat. We'll go ahead and get that one on a high. And we're going to put the parsnips in here now. Basically, we're cooking the parsnips like we would a potato. So we're kind of boiling them down in a chicken broth. We want to put the parsnips in here with the rest of our garlic that we had chopped up, which is another clove of garlic. And we're going to add our chicken broth. Now this can be a broth that you made or one that you bought. There's some really good ones in the store, but I always recommend that you make your own if you can. And you can keep that in the freezer and have it ready for any time. You don't want to completely submerge the parsnips. What you're trying to do is cook them in the same broth that we're going to use to mix up with our puree. So you don't want them completely covered. We don't want to waste any broth by pouring it off. So you want to just have enough to have them slightly submerged, but with just the top showing. And we're going to let those cook down. They are going to come to a boil. We're going to let them boil for a little while. In the meantime, we're going to saute off our broccoli, get some nice color on that, and then we're going to mash our parsnips and get them ready to make our parsnips puree. Our broccoli and our parsnips have been cooking for a few minutes. Our broccoli is ready for us to add our secret seasoning. And as I said before, this is a blend of soy sauce, red wine, and balsamic vinegar. And you want to drizzle it right over the top just like that and stir it around. It's a great seasoning to cook veggies in. It adds a great flavor and it makes anything taste good. These are pretty much done. I like to leave the veggies where they have a little bit of crunch to them. I don't like to cook them where they're mushy. So we're going to turn these off and put the lid back on, and the broccoli is done. Now we're going to check on our parsnips. Our parsnips have been cooking away in our chicken broth with the garlic, and you can see they've gotten a nice, beautiful color on them. And now they're ready for us to finish them off. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a potato masher. We're going to go ahead and turn off our burner and start mashing them. And once we get them mashed, we're going to add just a little bit of cream in here and mix these all around. Go ahead and add a little bit of that right now. This is a heavy whipping cream. You want to make sure you use heavy cream. It's going to give it a lot of flavor. There we go. Get these mixed around really well. We're going to add half a tablespoon of my secret seasoning blend right to the parsnips. And then we're going to take these and we're going to put these in a food processor and blend them up the rest of the way. So they're going to be really, really creamy and silky. Our broccoli is done. I'm just getting it in a bowl so we can serve it with our beautiful pork. And we're going to finish pureeing up our parsnips. So I'm going to set this over here. We've got our parsnips in the food processor and we put them in there while they're still hot because we're going to add half a stick of butter to our parsnips, and you need them to be hot to melt that butter. So we're going to take the top off here and put that right in there and then turn it on till it all comes together in a nice creamy mix. Parsnips are done pureeing, and what I've done is put them in the middle of the platter that we're going to serve the roast on. I like to make a little mound right in the middle of the platter, and we're going to set the roast directly on top of that. And speaking of the roast, our roast is out of the oven and it's beautiful. We cooked it for 45 minutes. And this is what you get. It's a nice brown color. It's beautiful. It's still got the strings around it, so we're going to go ahead and cut those off first. And then we're going to serve that on top of our parsnip puree. But I have a little secret. I like to cut up some raw onions to set the pork roast on. The heat from the pork roast softens up the onions and the flavor of the onions goes up into the meat and it's just delicious. Plus you can mix it with your puree and have a little onion flavor in there too. So what we're going to do first is cut off the strings. You want to get all of these off of here. You can ask your butcher to wrap it for you, and he will do a great job of making sure it's wrapped up and ready to go in the oven. But you really don't want to serve it with the strings on there because you wouldn't want somebody to get a little piece of string in their food. So we like to cut them off and pull them off. The meat will hold its shape now that we've cooked it, so you don't have to worry about it falling apart. All right, once we get all the strings off of here, we're going to put our pork on top of our puree with the sliced onions. Once you get the strings off, you're going to set that to the side and go ahead and get the onions cut up. I've got a nice big onion here because I like to put the rounds underneath the roast, and you can't do that with a little small onion. So you want an onion that's really big. We're going to cut both ends of the onion off just like we always do. And then we're going to cut through that top layer and peel that outer edge off. It's a great way to peel your onion. It gets rid of the outer layer of the onion, but it's an easy way to peel. It's quick, and if there's any bad spots on the onion on the outside, it gets rid of that also. So instead of cutting this like we normally do into cubes, we're going to cut it into pretty thick slices as if we were going to make some onion rings out of it. This is a delicious way to plate your meat because the onions not only are edible, they look nice, but they also give flavor to the pork. So what we're going to do is take our plate, put our onions right down on top of our puree, just like that. And then we're going to plate our pork right on top of the onions. The heat from the pork will cook the onions slightly. There we go. And that's our lesson for today. We learned how to cook a perfect pork loin, and we learned how to saute the veggies and make a beautiful parsnip puree.